The 2023 OSU World Cup is currently underway, and it has been one of the most entertaining OWCs to watch. At the same time, it has been one of the most chaotic. Some teams made leaps and bounds this year, reached new heights, and established themselves as powerhouses, while other teams with high expectations completely fell apart. The number 4 and 6 teams entering the tournament have to play each other for 9th. The number 2 and 3 teams have to play each other for 7th. There were frustrations that stemmed from players changing their usernames because identifying who's who got too confusing. We witnessed one of the greatest OWC matches of all time and one of the greatest tiebreaker clutches in OSU history to produce one of the most unexpected upsets of the tournament. The team that lost that match complained they had to wake up too early. They got clowned on because their match started at 11 a.m. The reigning 5-time champions made a confusing roster decision when they chose to exclude one of the best players in their country and now find themselves in a position they have never been in before. And one team ended up sandbagging their qualifier seed by having 2 of their best players play the qualifiers while in Las Vegas for TwitchCon, but emerged as by far the hottest team on the craziest tournament run after beating 2 of the world's best teams back-to-back and producing what could possibly be the most monumental upset in OSU history. All because of what could be the greatest rookie performance at OWC ever. Conventionality is broken and emotions run high because whenever you thought there was time to breathe, the 2023 OSU World Cup has produced many reasons to get hyped because this year, everything makes no sense.
What the is a mile?
Well, who's ready to face Poland in losers bracket?
Oh no!
Yeah. Cut paper is the Kobe of OSU. Yes!
If there's one thing that separates the 2023 OSU World Cup from previous years, it's parity. This year, it truly feels like there are a multitude of teams that could contend for the OWC crown. However, with many contenders and dark horses alike, it immediately causes conflict in the bracket because these teams have to face each other eventually. South Korea entered the tournament as the tournament favorites, which comes as a surprise to no one. They have consistently been a strong team throughout OSU history, but now they have reached new levels in terms of roster strength. Not only do they boast arguably the deepest roster out of all the teams this year, this is the first time that the trifecta of Karcher, worst HR player, and Flying Tuna would be on the same OWC team. However, getting these 3 on the same team almost didn't happen. In 2021, South Korea finished 3rd, albeit with worst HR player absent from their team. The very next year in 2022, South Korea would add worst HR player to the team, and both he and Karcher absolutely dominated the tournament en route to finishing in 2nd. But this time, they didn't have Tuna on their roster because of his mandatory military service. Heading into this year, it seemed like Karcher would be the one missing because he was slated to go into his military service in 2023. But after numerous delays because he got sick, he was able to push his military service back to 2024, giving the trio a chance to make moves together for 1 year. This is their first and what is possibly their only chance for these 3 to play with each other. Everything relied on what they would do this year, and they absolutely lived up to the hype. South Korea would claim the first seed of the tournament and dispatch their first 3 opponents with ease, losing only 2 maps total en route to solidifying their spot in the semifinals and the winner side of the bracket. South Korea's tear through the tournament thus far is probably the only foreseeable outcome entering the tournament that came into fruition. Other top teams, however, weren't as lucky. Indonesia were dark horse candidates to make waves in the OWC bracket this year after clocking in as the 9th seed of the tournament. With a bit of momentum, it felt like they had a real chance at causing serious upsets in the tournament. However, the complete opposite happened. In the very first round of the tournament, they were slated to go up against the 24th seed Ukraine. According to the OWC Pick'ems page, they were 91.5% favorites to win this match and advance to the round of 16. Unfortunately for them, they would get completely skunked as Ukraine would send them to the losers bracket with a clean 5-0 sweep that absolutely no one saw coming. Indonesia would go on to underperform their seed, finishing at 13th to 16th place, but they weren't the only ones to completely crumble under their own expectations. Last year, Poland established themselves as true contenders after finishing at 4th place in the 2022 OSU World Cup. Most notably, they are backed by Malashevsky as their tournament carry, who many consider to be the best tournament player in the game right now. As for the rest of the roster, it only got better. This year, they qualified as the 2nd seed of the tournament, making this the 2nd year in a row they were the 2 seed. They were also extremely close to claiming the 1st seed ahead of South Korea, and once the tournament started, they were off to the best start imaginable. Through the first 2 rounds of the tournament, they were the only team that didn't lose a single map and were looking to do more damage later in the tournament. As the only undefeated team entering the quarterfinals, they were pitted against the 7th seeded Australia, and while they were a prime dark horse candidate, pretty much everyone expected Poland to come out on top. Poland entered this match as the overwhelming 94.2% pick'em favorites to win this match. But when it was time for them to play, they completely fell apart. The Polish roster got off to a bad start in the match after dropping the first 3 maps in a row and giving up a breakpoint in the process. Each team then won their next 2 map picks, and Australia found themselves at match point with a 5-2 lead and on the verge of pulling off the biggest upset of the tournament thus far. It seemed doomed for Poland. However, they began to bring things back. They resurrected themselves in this match by winning the next 3 maps in a row to tie the match up at 5-5 and force the tiebreaker map to be played. All of a sudden, this match was turning out to be the absolute best match of the year. Poland now had all of the momentum at their disposal and were well on their way to completing this incredible comeback. The tiebreaker was 3/4 of the way through, and Poland had a score lead of more than 80,000 points with combos dead even between both teams. They had full control over their destiny, and unless they completely fell apart, they were going to win this match. They just needed to hold on.
It's just Rafal and Emric, and Rafal misses! There it is! Emric holding on for the Australians. It's 60k, 50k. He's still going for the boys right now. 40k difference.
The power is in his hands to clutch this up for his team. The fate of Australia in the Auss World Cup rests in his hands as the score lead flickers over to Australia, and now he just needs to hold on. Can he do it? Can he clutch up for his team? He's getting it done!
Going!
To end one of the most intense OWC matches of all time, Emric held on to his combo until the bitter end, single-handedly allowing Australia to clutch out the map win on the tiebreaker map. It was an absolutely ice-cold closeout in a match that sent ripples throughout the OSA community. While everyone was raving over this crazy outcome, the Polish roster, on the other hand, wasn't happy. They blamed their loss on the fact they had to wake up early. The only problem was that this match started at 11 AM, and they got clowned on by several people because everyone thought it was ridiculous that they were complaining about waking up at a normal time. While they were upset about how this match turned out, there were other things that people got annoyed with, specifically name changes. Every single year, it's tradition for most teams to carry out a collab amongst their teammates. Normally, this involves players changing their OSU profile pictures to fit a certain theme, along with a banner that accompanies it. However, some players took this one step further and chose to change their usernames as well. This is because the OSU tournament client is limited to only displaying the current usernames of each player, so if you change your name, it will appear as such on the client. And because it's impossible to manually change each player's name that shows up on the client, many players took advantage of this. From Team Germany, Akarnya changed his name to Tim Kackner, and now whenever he plays a map for his team, his name on the client is displayed as Tim Kackner. The United States joined the name change party when both Kama and Window Life chose to rename themselves to Cheeto Blast and Cheeto Blast 2 respectively. But perhaps the most comedic of all the name changes was when Zoodinator changed her username to His Kitten. She then put out this tweet because her name change means her name will be displayed as His Kitten live on stream, which will probably confuse her dad. While many players changed their usernames, none of that compares to what the Philippines did. All 8 players on the roster changed their usernames to form the Hayok Army to pay homage to Hayok 2044, who was one of the players on the Philippines roster. Because all of them switched to extremely similar usernames and the inability to manually change display names on the OSU client, it was nearly impossible to differentiate who was who on stream. This, alongside with all the other username changes, caused OWC commentators and staff alike to get upset, not only because it was hard for them to identify which player was which, but because it made things impossible to understand for the casual viewing audience. However, it seems like most people got over this fairly quickly and bought into the memes, and part of that might have to do with the fact that the Philippines were on the absolute come up and reached new heights. Before the 2023 OSU World Cup, the Philippines' best finish at OWC was 9th to 12th place at the 3rd rendition of OWC. That tournament ended 10 years ago. They were a team that had never made it into the top 8 at any OWC, but this year, they jumped from the 14th seed last year all the way up to the 5th seed in 2023. They were now projected to make it further into the tournament than they had ever done before, and with their new promise and expectation, they came through. The Philippines defeated Mexico and Romania 5-1 to make it to the quarterfinals, but ran into another team with rising superstar talent. Last year, Russia entered OWC with promise as they entered the tournament with the 7th seed, but instead ended up on the wrong side of the most bizarre cheating scandal in OSU history. This year, however, they rose to prominence, climbing the ranks and claiming the 4th seed of the tournament. And after 2 5-1 victories against the Netherlands and Hong Kong, Russia and the Philippines would cross paths in the quarterfinals. The winner between these two rising powerhouses would guarantee themselves a spot in winner's semifinals, while the loser would have to fight for their lives in the loser's bracket. Russia became the first to strike when they secured a breakpoint thanks to a huge FC from Gamer228666 to make it a 3-2 match in their favor. It seemed like this would be the turning point of the match, and that was very much true for the Philippines. Out of nowhere, the OG Hayok and Nathan Ram would turn the match on its head. Hayok 2044 and Nathan took full control of the match when the two of them FC'd the last 4 maps in the match all in a row. This helped the Philippines secure the last 4 maps of the match to win 6-3, guaranteeing themselves at least a top 6 finish and their best performance in team history. The top half of the bracket saw South Korea and the Philippines live up to their potential. Meanwhile, the bottom half of the bracket was an absolute bloodbath. Normally, the strongest teams don't face each other until the later stages of the tournament because of their high seeding. But on the off chance that a powerhouse team enters the tournament underseeded, it causes immediate problems for themselves and their opponents.
Come on, you f***er break.
And that is exactly what Canada's roster did. Seeding is based on the qualifiers that take place before the tournament starts, but both Xylus and Zudinator ended up playing the qualifiers away from home. It just so happened that TwitchCon was taking place while the OWC qualifiers were going on, so the two of them ended up playing the qualifiers on a different setup all the way in Las Vegas.
This PC might have some of the worst offset I've ever seen, like ever. I need 200 offset to play the game, I'm pretty sure.
Why is my game unplayable? It's still kind of doing that, but like it's really not doing it. It's just like it doesn't even say my game lags. It's just all my inputs from all my devices just stop for a second. I have no idea why.
This ended up tanking their seed, and despite having a team that is fully capable of a deep run, they fell all the way down to the 11th seed. Because of their low seed, immediate chaos was made apparent in the tournament. After making quick work of Norway, there was an immediate bracket conflict because Germany and Canada were forced to play each other in the second round of the tournament. For reference, these two teams were the number 3 and number 4 seeds respectively in last year's OWC, yet one of them was going to be sent to the losers bracket before the quarterfinals even started. Canada entered this match as slightly underdogs to Germany, but managed to surprise everyone by taking command early in the match and taking the first breakpoint to give themselves a 3-1 lead. Germany would immediately bounce back with a destructive breakpoint win of their own to bring the match to 3-2 to set up a pivotal map 6. The map was extremely contested, however, Canada would take another breakpoint by winning the map by a slim margin to reach match point with a 4-2 lead and close it out on the next map for a 5-2 victory, sending last year's third placing team to the losers bracket before the quarterfinals. However, they couldn't celebrate for long because they would face an even tougher challenge. Their reward for defeating one of the world's best teams was playing the 5-time reigning champions next week in the quarterfinals. As if Canada's path throughout the tournament couldn't get any more tough, they were slated to play against the United States, who entered the tournament as the 3rd seed. That placement seems abnormally low for the team that won the last 5 renditions of the OSU World Cup and has long been the most dominant country in the game. And that's because it is. The United States roster was in complete disarray entering this year. With their best tournament player in the past 2 years facing severe allegations and I'm a Fancy Lad, who was their team captain in 2021 and 2022, dropping out of OWC, they had to scramble to form a new roster to make up for their lost pieces. Things seemed bleak for them, but then a miracle happened. After a 2-year tournament hiatus, Vaxay made his grand return to the tournament scene, trying out for the US OWC team. With him back, it felt like they still had the ability to make strides, but things took a weird turn. Prior to the start of the tournament, the US made a roster decision that was confusing to the wide majority of the OSU world. Decaton is inarguably a top 5 or even top 3 tournament player in the United States and was one of the most important players in the United States Championship run at the 2022 OSU World Cup. Entering OWC 2023, many people thought he was an absolute lock for their roster. However, the US roster was revealed and Decaton was nowhere to be found. This absolutely confused everyone. And to add even more salt in that wound, things somehow got worse. This decision became even more questionable after Decaton proceeded to push Vaxay to tiebreaker in MREC Grandmaster Cup a couple weeks later, further solidifying that Decaton was by far the most egregious snub for this year's OWC and possibly of all time. As a direct result of their turbulent roster troubles, the US entered the tournament as the 3 seed, which is the first time they have not claimed the number 1 seed ever since the qualifier stage's inception in 2019. Thanks to their lower seed, they were now forced to play against Canada in the quarterfinals. The last time that these two teams played each other was in 2020 in winners finals, where the US would completely dismantle Canada while only surrendering 1 map in the process. This time, however, everything completely turned on its head thanks to a player making his OWC debut a breakout performance. Along with Zudinator, Xylus, and Vesperit, Cutpaper was brought into Canada's OWC team as one of 4 hidden specialists on the roster. However, he might have dealt with the most pressure out of all of his teammates because he was the only one on the entire team without any prior OWC experience. As the only OWC rookie on the team, his nerves were quickly put to the test in his first 2 matches, and now in his OWC debut, he had to face the 5-time defending champions. Cutpaper was very solid in his first 2 matches, but now with their winners bracket lives on the line, Canada desperately needed someone to pull through. And when they needed it most, Cutpaper absolutely went off. After taking a 1-0 lead on their first map pick, the United States were looking to tie things up on their Nomad 2 pick, and it seemed like it would work. All 4 of the US players set scores that were higher than 3 of the Canadian players and tried trusted to play the map. However, they couldn't stop Cut Paper, who FC'd with near 99% accuracy and single-handedly willed his team to a break point to take a 2-0 lead. On the very next map, Cut Paper would FC again, this time along with Zoodinator to make it 3-0, and then another breakpoint on the fourth map made things 4-0. The United States would finally get a win on the board by taking a breakpoint of their own to make the score 4-1. However, that moment was short-lived for them because Canada would steal the breakpoint right back to put themselves at match point with a 5-1 score lead. At this point, everyone was shocked with what they were witnessing. With a double breakpoint advantage, Canada had 2 map picks at their disposal to win the match and unseat the United States. And they wasted no time, because on their next pick, they ended things in dominating fashion with FCs from both Zoodinator and Cut Paper yet again to close out the match 6-1, getting revenge on the United States from their loss in 2020 and sending them to the losers bracket. The 81.6% pick'em favorites won only 1 map against the team they were favored to beat. And that was because they got owned by one of the greatest OWC rookie performances ever. Cut Paper had an absolute monster performance, getting 4 FCs out of the 5 maps that he played, top scoring his team twice, was the only player in the lobby with a match cost of at least 2, and was far and away the best player in the quarterfinals. Claiming number 1 on the OWC spreadsheet with a performance score of 2.134, Cut Paper was the main man behind one of the most monumental upsets in OWC history. Apparently, he was doing so well that he was allegedly laughing in his team's VC after FCing maps. Cut Paper quite literally went insane after he played insane, and Canada were now in the winners bracket semi-finals after defeating the first and third placing teams in last year's OWC back-to-back. As for the United States, they face a situation that they never had to face ever. Ever since the OC World Cup became a double elimination tournament in 2014, the US has remained in the winners bracket until at least the semifinals. For the first time ever, they entered the losers bracket before the semifinals after suffering their earliest loss in the double elimination era. And speaking of the losers bracket, things get even more hectic down there. With their losses, Poland and the United States are slated to play each other in losers. What was once thought to be a potential matchup in the grand finals is now a match where the loser takes 7th. The number 2 and 3 teams, both of them with championship aspirations, ended up suffering shocking upset losses, and now one of them is going to go home in the 7th to 8th position. Russia and Germany also suffered losses, and were the number 4 and 6 teams entering the tournament, but now are forced to play each other where the loser gets 9th. Every development from here on out would prove to be significant because no matter what, there was going to be heartbreak. Poland would win their first losers bracket match against China very soundly, and so did the United States in their first match in losers, albeit for the US, there was something off. The United States beat Sweden 6-1, but there was a problem because Vaxey's performance looked rough. Vaxey played in only 3 maps, which is low for his standards, but what was even more concerning is that he got the bottom score on his team twice out of those 3 maps. He finished with the lowest match cost on his entire team, which is a statistic no one could have seen coming. People started to question if he was just simply washed up from all the rust, because if he played like this against Poland the next day, there was serious cause for concern. The fated matchup between the United States and Poland was now underway, but instead of it taking place towards the end of the tournament, they met in a match where the loser was eliminated at 7th. As far as Vaxey's struggles were concerned, he went from being the player with the worst match cost on his team to the best, and his team greatly benefited as a result. Apparently in the match against Sweden, Vaxey practiced the wrong map pool and was ill-prepared for the United States first losers bracket match, but now he looked like he was back in his prime form. He and the rest of the team would dominate with a 6-2 victory. Poland's roster didn't do much to help Malashevsky, who played lights out, and this felt like a massive letdown. And to make things worse, their previous scheduling complaints came back to bite them in the worst way possible. They were upset about losing a match they had to play at 11 AM, and then proceeded to lose a match where their opponents woke up earlier than the time they complained about. The Polish roster played this match at 4 PM, which meant that Takedo, Rectagon, and Kama, who live on the east coast of the United States, played this match at 10 AM. As for Vaxey, Fiery Rage, Window Life, Woodshi, and Boshi Man, who live on the west coast, they played at 7 AM. They went out in one of the most humiliating ways possible, and no one was afraid to let them know. With this victory, the United States made it to the semifinals for the 10th time in a row, which is the longest active streak at OWC. However, there was another team in the losers bracket that could match that streak. Russia and Germany found themselves in even more unfriendly ground than the US and Poland because the loser wouldn't even crack the top 8. But unlike the US versus Poland match, this match went down to the wire. Despite being the higher seed, Russia entered this match as the underdogs, with Germany being expected to win as the 61.2% pick'em favorites. That didn't stop them from taking a 5-3 lead to get themselves to match point with their own pick coming up next. But then things got weird. Ciccone would end up disconnecting in the middle of Russia's last pick of the match. Germany won this map by more than 1.1 million points, so even if Ciccone SS the map, Germany would have won the map anyways, but on top of the game-changing breakpoint that Germany just won, the disconnect seemed to be a full mental reset. Germany would end up capitalizing on their final pick to force tiebreaker, and secured the match with a convincing win on the tiebreaker map to complete the comeback down 3-5. This was an emotional match that Russia found themselves on the unfortunate side of, as Germany awaited the winner of the United Kingdom versus Chile, and somehow this match was possibly even more heart-stopping. Just like the aforementioned Russia versus Germany match, the UK and Chile would also battle it out in the tiebreaker. As for the ending, I'll just let you watch.
Is the advantage now going in favor of Chile? No, it's not. There's a double miss from Chile. Wait, there's time. Kingling's gone down. Akolibet and Roger's still holding. It's slowly shrinking down. Sunland goes down as well. It's just Mathin into Calming for the Chile. Akolibet drops, but Rog still has it, but there's a big drop there. It's gaining now back in favor of Chile. There's barely any time left. Mathin into Cameo, keeping the recovery alive. And a triple miss from the UK. And a double miss from Chile. Is there enough map left for the UK to bring this back? For Rog to bring it back. Space Street leads in the drop, and it won't happen.
Blood pressure medication sales definitely spiked after this match, but with this win, Chile guaranteed themselves a spot in the top 8, which is their best finish at an OWC in more than 12 years. Unfortunately for them, Germany would put an end to their magical run the next day with a convincing 6-2 victory to make it to the semi-finals in OWC for the 10th time in a row, tying the US for the longest active streak. Stepping away from the losers bracket bloodbath, the winners bracket teams were well on their way to greatness, as a win would guarantee themselves a top 3 finish and an OWC badge. South Korea versus Philippines was reminiscent of what took place during the 2022 Osumania World Cup. The Philippines shocked everyone by getting off to an incredible start and took a 4-1 lead with a double breakpoint advantage, and were looking to send the best team entering the tournament to the losers bracket. Unfortunately for them, they committed the great sin of poking the metaphorical bear that is the stacked South Korean roster, and they paid the price for it. On the same day that Faker won Worlds, Worst HR player completely took over in this match, setting the OWC PP record with an FCM Blue Zenith with Hard Rock, and closing out the match with yet another FC to give South Korea a 6-4 victory after winning the last 5 maps in a row, sending South Korea to the top 3 for the 3rd year in a row. It makes sense that we've never seen both Faker and Worst HR player in the same room, because they could quite literally be the same person, just ice cold in the clutch. The other winners bracket match featured 2 teams on incredible runs coming off of monumental upsets. Either the 7th or 11th seeded team of the tournament would be making it to winners finals with a top 3 finish. Fresh off their wins against Germany and the United States, it was Canada that entered this match as the 73.6% favorites to win. But believing in that expectation was a grave mistake. Many slept on this Australian roster because the insane amount of stacked teams entering this year's OWC. Throughout this entire tournament, they didn't care about the doubters and thrived when everyone else underestimated their team strength. Many people thought that this roster was just Emmerich, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Their entire roster is deep and built to win, and they would once again make a statement to silence any doubt. The first 3 maps were traded with Canada holding a 2-1 lead, but then this match turned into the Australia show. The Australian roster would absolutely play out of their minds, shocking the world once again by winning the next 5 maps in a row, bringing themselves to a dominating 6-2 victory over the team fresh off of beating the 5-time reigning OSU champions. The best finish for Australia at an OWC was 5th to 6th place in 2020, but their legendary run through this year's OWC has led them to a guaranteed top 3 finish for the first time in team history. And with all of that, the bracket for the finals weekend is set. In winners, we have the team that everyone expected to be there, and a team on by far the craziest run we have seen this year. And the losers bracket might just be the most stacked losers bracket of all time. With how the tournament has played out so far, there is no telling what will happen this week, but one thing is for certain. This year, with all of our expectations and the chaos that ensued, the 2023 OSU World Cup has literally made no sense.